Demis Hassabis, welcome back to Hard Fork.
Thanks for having me again.
A lot has happened since the last time you were on the show. Most notably, you won a Nobel Prize. Congrats on that.
Congrats.
Ours must be still in the mail. Can you put in a good word for next year with the committee?
I will do.
I imagine it's very exciting to win a Nobel Prize. I know that had been a goal for a long time of yours. I imagine it also leads to like a lot of people giving you crap like during everyday activities, like if you're, struggling to work the printer and people are just like, oh, Mr. Nobel laureate. Like, does that happen?
A little bit. I mean, look, I tried to say, look, I can't, that maybe it's a good excuse to like not have to fix those kinds of things, right? So it's more shield.
So you just had Google I.O., and it was really the Gemini show. I mean, I think Gemini's name was mentioned something like 95 times in the keynote. Of all the stuff that was announced, what do you think will be the biggest deal for the average user?
Wow. Well, I mean, we did announce a lot of things. I think for the average user, I think it's the new powerful models, and I hope this Astra-type technology coming into Gemini Live. I think it's really magical, actually, when people use it for the first time and they realize that actually AI is capable already today of doing much more than what they thought. And then I guess VO3 was the biggest announcement of the show, probably, and seems to be going viral now. And that's pretty exciting as well, I think.
Yeah. One thing that struck me about I.O. this year compared to previous years is that it seems like Google is sort of getting A.G.I. pilled, as they say. I remember interviewing researchers at Google, even a couple years ago, and there was a little taboo about talking about A.G.I. They would sort of be like, oh, that's like Demis and his DeepMind people in London. That's sort of like their crazy thing that they're excited about. But here we're doing like, real research. But now you've got like senior Google executives talking openly about it. What explains that shift?
I think the sort of AI part of the equation becoming more and more central. Like I sometimes describe Google DeepMind now as the engine room of Google. And I think you saw that probably in the keynote yesterday, really, if you take a step back. And then it's very clear. I think you could sort of say AGI pilled is maybe the right word, that we're quite close to this human-level general intelligence, maybe closer than people thought even a couple of years ago, and it's going to have broad, cross-cutting impact. And I think there's another thing that you saw at the keynote. It's sort of literally popping up everywhere because it's this horizontal layer that's going to underpin everything. And I think everyone is starting to understand that, and maybe a bit of the DeepMind ethos is bleeding into the general Google, which is great.
You mentioned that Project Astra is powering some things that maybe people don't even realize that AI can yet do. Yeah. I think this speaks to a real challenge in the AI business right now, which is that the models have these pretty amazing capabilities, but either the products aren't selling them or the users just sort of haven't figured them out yet. So how are you thinking about that challenge, and how much do you bring yourself to the product question as opposed to the research question?
Yeah, it's great question. I mean, I think one of the challenges I think of this space is obviously the underlying tech is moving unbelievably fast. And I think that's quite different even from the other big revolutionary techs, internet and mobile. At some point, you get some sort of stabilization of the tech stack so that then the focus can be on product, right? Or exploiting that tech stack. And what we've got here, which I think is very unusual, but also quite exciting from a researcher perspective, is that the tech stack itself is evolving incredibly fast, as you guys know. So I think that makes it uniquely challenging, actually, on the product side, not just for us at Google and DeepMind, but for startups, for anyone really, any company, small and large, is what do you bet on right now when that could be 100% better in a year, as we've seen, and so you've got this interesting thing where you need kind of fairly deeply technical sort of product people, product designers and managers, I think, in order to sort of intercept where the technology may be in a year. So there's things it can't do today, and you want to design a product that's going to come out in a year. So you've got you've got a pretty deep understanding of the tech and where it might go to sort of work out what features you can rely on. And so it's an interesting one. I think that's what you're seeing, so many different things being tried out. And then if something works, we've got to really double down quickly on that.
Yeah, during during your keynote, you talked about Gemini as powering both sort of productivity assistant style stuff and also fundamental science and research challenges. And I wonder, in your mind, is that the same problem that sort of like one great model can solve, or are those sort of very different problems that just require different approaches?
I think, when you look at it, it looks like an incredible breadth of things, which is true. And how are these things related, other than the fact I'm interested in all of them? But is that that was always the idea with building general intelligence, truly generally, and this in this way that we're doing, it should be applicable to almost anything, right? That being productivity, which is very exciting, help billions of people in their everyday lives, to cracking some of the biggest problems in science. 90%, I would say, of it is the underlying core general models. In our case, Gemini, especially 2.5. And in most of these areas, you still need additional applied research or a little bit of special casing from the domain, maybe it's special data or whatever, to tackle that problem. And, maybe we work with domain experts in the scientific areas. But underlying it, when you crack one of those areas, you can also put those learnings back into the general model. And then the general model gets better and better. So it's a kind of very interesting flywheel. And it's great fun for someone like me who's very interested in many things. You get to use this technology and sort of go into almost any field that you find interesting.
I think that a lot of AI companies are wrestling with right now is how many resources to devote to sort of the core AI push on the foundation models, making the models better at the basic level, versus how much time and energy and money do you spend trying to spin out parts of that and commercialize it and turn it into products. And I imagine this is both like a resources challenge, but also like a personnel challenge, because say you join DeepMind as an engineer and you want to like build A.G.I, and then someone from Google comes to you and says like, we actually want your help like building the shopping thing that's going to like let people try on clothes. Is that a challenging conversation to have with people who joined for one reason and maybe asked to work on something else?
Yeah, well, we don't, it's sort of self-selecting internally. We don't have to, that's one advantage of being quite large. There are enough engineers on the product teams and the product areas, that can deal with the product development, prod eng, and the researchers, if they want to stay in core research, they're absolutely, that's fine, and we need that. But actually, you'll find a lot of researchers are quite motivated by real-world impact, be that in medicine, obviously, and things like isomorphic, but also to have billions of people use their research. It's actually really motivating. And so there's plenty of people that like to do both. So we don't, there's no need for us to sort of have to pivot people to certain things.
You did a panel yesterday with Sergey Brin, Google's co-founder, who has been working on this stuff back in the office. And interestingly, he has shorter AGI timelines than you. He thought AGI would arrive before 2030, and you said just after. He actually accused you of sandbagging, basically like artificially pushing out your estimates so that you could like underpromise and overdeliver. But I'm curious about that, because you will often hear people at different AI companies arguing about when the timelines are. But presumably you and Sergey have access to all the same information and the same roadmaps, and you understand what's possible and what's not. So what is he seeing that you're not, or vice versa, that leads you to different conclusions about when AGI is going to arrive?
Well, first of all, there isn't that much difference in our timelines if he's just before 2030 and I'm just after. Also, my timeline's been pretty consistent since the start of DeepMind in 2010. So we thought it was roughly a 20-year mission, and amazingly, we're on track. So it's somewhere around then, I would think. And I feel like I actually have obviously a probability distribution of, where the most mass of that is between 5 and 10 years from now. And I think partly it's to do with predicting anything precisely 5 to 10 years out is very difficult. So there's uncertainty bars around that. And then also there's uncertainty about how many more breakthroughs are required, right? And also about the definition of AGI. I have quite a high bar, which I've always had, which is it should be able to do all of the things that the human brain can do, right? Even theoretically. And so that's a higher bar than, say, what the typical individual human could do, which is obviously very economically important. That would be a big milestone, but not, in my view, enough to call it AGI. And we talked on stage a little bit about what is missing from today's systems, sort of true out-of-the-box invention and thinking, sort of inventing a conjecture rather than just solving a maths conjecture. Solving one's pretty good, but actually inventing like the Riemann hypothesis or something as significant as that mathematicians agree is really important is much harder. And also consistency. So the consistency is a requirement of generality, really, and it should be very, very difficult for even top experts to find flaws, especially trivial flaws in the systems, which we can easily find today. And, the average person can do that. So there's a sort of capabilities gap and there's a consistency gap before we get to what I would consider AGI.
And when you think about closing that gap, do you think it arrives via incremental 2-5% improvements in each successive model just kind of stacked up over a long period of time? Mm-hmm. Or do you think it's more likely that we'll hit some sort of technological breakthrough and then all of a sudden there's liftoff and we hit some sort of intelligence explosion?
I think it could be both, and I think for sure both is going to be useful, which is why we push unbelievably hard on the scaling and the what you would call incremental. Although actually there's a lot of innovation even in that to keep moving that forward. Pre-training, post-training, inference time compute, all of that stack. So there's actually lots of exciting research, and we showed some of that diffusion model, the deep think model. So we're innovating at all parts of that, the traditional stack, should we call it. And then on top of that, we're doing more greenfield things, more blue sky things, like Alpha Evolve, maybe you could include in that, which
is there a difference between a greenfield thing and a blue sky thing?
I'm not sure. Maybe they're pretty similar. So some new area, let's call it, and then that could come back into the main branch, right? And as you both know, I've been a fundamental believer in sort of foundational research. We've always had the broadest, deepest research bench, I think, of any lab out there, and that's what allowed us to do past big breakthroughs. Obviously, transformers, but AlphaGo, AlphaZero, all of these things, distillation, and if, to the extent any of those things are needed again, another big breakthrough of that level, I would back us to do that. And we're pursuing lots of very exciting avenues that could bring that sort of step change, as well as the incremental. And then they, of course, also interact, because the better you have your base models, the more things you can try on top of it. Again, like Alpha Evolve, add in evolutionary programming in that case on top of the LLMs.
We recently talked to Karen Howe, who's a journalist, just wrote a book about AI, and she was making an argument essentially against scale, that you don't need these big general models that are incredibly energy intensive and compute intensive and require billions of dollars and new data centers and all kinds of resources to make happen, that instead of doing that kind of thing, you could build smaller models. You could build narrower models. You could have a model like AlphaFold that is just designed to predict the 3D structures of proteins. You don't need a huge behemoth of a model to accomplish that. What's your response to that?
Well, I think you need those big models. We love big and small models. So you need the big models often to train the smaller models. So we're very proud of our kind of flash models, which are the most, we call them our workhorse models, really efficient, some of the most popular models. We use a ton of those types of size models internally. But you can't build those kind of models without distilling from the larger teacher models, and even things like AlphaFold, which obviously I'm a huge advocate of more of those types of models that can tackle right now. We don't have to wait to AGI. We can tackle now really important problems in science and medicine today, and that will require taking the general techniques, but then potentially specializing it, in that case around protein structure prediction. And I think there's huge potential for doing more of those things, and we are largely in our science work, AI for science work, and I think we're producing something pretty cool on that pretty much every month these days. And I think there should be a lot more exploration on that. Probably a lot of startups could be built, combining some kind of general model that exists today with some domain specificity. And but if you're interested in AGI, you've got to push again both sides of that. It's not an either or in my mind. I'm an and, right? Like, let's scale. Let's look at specialized techniques, combining that in hybrid systems, sometimes they're called, and let's look at new blue sky research that could deliver the next transformers. We're betting on all of those things.
You mentioned Alpha Evolve, something that Kevin and I were both really fascinated by. Tell us what Alpha Evolve is.
Well, at a high level, it's basically taking our latest Gemini models, actually 2 different ones, to generate sort of ideas, hypotheses about programs and other mathematical functions. And then they go into sort of evolutionary programming process to decide which ones of those are most promising. And then that gets sort of ported into the next step.
And tell us a little bit about what evolutionary programming is. It sounds very exciting.
Yeah, so it's basically a way for systems to kind of explore new space, right? So like what things should we, in genetics, like mutate to give you a kind of new organism. So you can think about the same way in programming or in mathematics. You change the program in some way, and then you compare it to some answer you're trying to get, and then the ones that fit best according to a sort of evaluation function, you put back into the next set of generating new ideas. We have our most efficient model, sort of Flash model, generating possibilities, and then we have the Pro model critiquing that, right, and deciding which one of those is most promising to be selected for the next round of evolution.
So it's sort of like an autonomous AI research organization almost, where you have some AIs coming up with hypotheses, other AIs testing them and supervising them. And the goal, as I understand it, is to have an AI that can kind of improve itself or over time or suggest improvements to existing problems.
Yes. So it's the beginning of, I think that's why people are so excited about it, and we're excited about it. It's the beginning of a kind of automated process. It's still not fully automated, and also it's still relatively narrow. We've applied it to many things like chip design, scheduling, AI tasks on our data centers more efficiently, even improving matrix multiplication, one of the most fundamental units of training algorithms. So it's actually amazingly useful already, but it's still constrained to domains that are kind of provably correct, right? Which obviously maths and coding are, but we need to sort of fully generalize that.
But it's interesting because I think for a lot of people, the knock they have on LLMs in general is, well, all you can really give me is the statistical median of your training data. But what you're saying is we now have a way of going beyond that to potentially generate novel ideas that are actually useful in advancing the state of the art.
That's right. But we already had these. This is another approach, Alpha Evolve, using evolutionary methods. But we already had evidence of that even way back in AlphaGo days. So it's AlphaGo came up with new Go strategies, most famously Move 37 in Game 2 of our big Lee Sedol World Championship match. And okay, it was limited to a game, but it was a genuinely new strategy that had never been seen before, even though we've played Go for hundreds of years. So that's when I kicked off our sort of AlphaFold projects and science projects, because I was waiting to see evidence of that kind of spark of creativity, you could call it, right, or originality, at least within the domain of what we know. But there's still a lot further that has to, so we know that these kinds of models paired with things like Monte Carlo tree search or reinforcement learning planning techniques can get you to new regions of space to explore. And evolutionary methods is another way of going beyond what the current model knows to explore, force it into a new regime where it's not seen it before.
I've been looking for a good Monte Carlo tree for so long now. So if you could help me find one, it would honestly be a huge help.
One of these things could help.
Okay, great.
So I read the Alpha Evolve paper, or to be more precise, I fed it into Notebook LM and had it make a podcast that I could then listen to that would explain it to me at a slightly more elementary level. And one fascinating thing that stuck out to me is a detail about how you were able to make Alpha Evolve more creative. And one of the ways that you did it was by essentially forcing the model to hallucinate. I mean, so many people right now are obsessed with eliminating hallucinations. Sure. But it seemed to me like one way to read that paper is that there's actually a scenario in which you want models to hallucinate or be creative, whatever you want to call it.
Yes. Well, I think that's right. I think you know hallucination in when you want factual things obviously is you don't want, but in creative situations where you can think of it as a little bit like lateral thinking in an MBA course or something, right? Is just create some crazy ideas. Most of them don't make sense, but the odd one or two may get you to a region of the search space that is actually quite valuable. It turns out once you evaluate it afterwards, and so you can substitute the word hallucination maybe for imagination at that point, right? They're obviously two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. I did talk to one AI safety person who was a little bit worried about AlphaEvolve, not because of the actual technology and the experiments, which this person said, they're fascinating, but because of the way it was rolled out. So Google DeepMind created AlphaEvolve and then used it to optimize some systems inside Google and kept it sort of hidden for a number of months, and only then sort of released it to the public. And this person was saying, well, if we really are getting to the point where these AI systems are starting to become recursively self-improving and they can sort of build a better AI, doesn't that imply that if Google DeepMind does build AGI or even super intelligence, that it's going to keep it to itself for a while rather than doing the responsible thing and informing the public?
Well, I think it's a bit of both, actually. You need to, first of all, AlphaEvolve is a very nascent self-improvement thing, right? And it's still got human in the loop, and it's only shaving off, albeit important percentage points off of already existing tasks. That's valuable, but it's not creating any kind of step changes. And there's a trade-off between, carefully evaluating things internally before you release it to the public out into the world, and then also getting the extra critique back, which is also very useful from the academic community and so on. And also we have a lot of trusted tester type of programs that we talk about where people get early access to these things, and then give us feedback and stress test them, including sometimes the safety institutes as well.
But my understanding was you weren't just like red teaming this internally within Google. You were actually like using it to make the data centers more efficient, using it to make the kernels that train the AI models more efficient. So I guess what this person is saying is like, it's just we want to start getting good habits around these things now before they become something like AGI, and they were just a little worried that maybe this is going to be something that stays hidden for longer than it needs to. So I don't like you. I would love to hear your response to that.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think that system is not anything really that I would say, has any risk on the AGI type of front. I think as we get, and I think today's systems still are not, although very impressive, are not that powerful from any kind of AGI risk standpoint that maybe this person was talking about. And I think you need to have both. You need to have incredibly rigorous internal tests of these things, and then you need to also get collaborative inputs from external. So I think it's a bit of both. I actually don't know the details of the AlphaEvolve process for the last few, the first few months. It was just function search before, and then it became more general. So it's sort of evolved itself over the last year in terms of becoming this general purpose tool. And it still has a lot of way to go before we can actually use it in our main branch, which is at that point, I think then becomes more serious, like with Gemini. It's sort of separate from that currently.
Let's talk about AI safety a little bit more broadly. It's been my observation that it seemed like if the further back in time you go and the less powerful AI systems you have, the more everyone seemed to talk about the safety risk. And it seems like now as the models improve, we hear about it less and less, including at the keynote yesterday. So I'm curious what you make of this moment in AI safety, if you feel like you're paying enough attention to the risk that could be created by the systems that you have, and if you are as committed to it as you were, say, 3 or 4 years ago, when a lot of these outcomes seem less likely.
Yeah, well, we're just as committed as we've ever been. I mean, we've from the beginning of DeepMind, we planned for success. So success meant something looking like this. This is what we kind of imagined. I mean, it's sort of unbelievable still that it's actually happened, but it is sort of in the Overton window of what we thought was going to happen if these technologies really did develop the way we thought they were going to. And the risk and attending to mitigating those risks was part of that. And so we do a huge amount of work on our systems. I think we have very robust red teaming processes, both pre and post launches. And we've learned a lot. And I think that's what's the difference now between having these systems have, albeit early systems, contact with the real world. I think that's actually been, I'm sort of persuaded now that has been a useful thing overall. And I wasn't sure, I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I may have thought maybe it's better staying in a research lab and kind of collaborating with academia and that. But actually, there's a lot of things you don't get to see or understand unless millions of people try it. So it's this weird trade-off again between you can only do it when there's millions of smart people try your technology and then you find all these edge cases. So, however big your testing team is, it's only going to be, 100 people or 1,000 people or something. So it's not comparable to tens of millions of people using your systems. But on the other hand, you want to know as much as possible ahead of time so you can mitigate the risks before they happen. So this is interesting, and it's good learning. I think what's happened in the industry in the last 2-3 years has been great, because we've been learning when the systems are not that powerful or risky, as you were saying earlier, right? I think things are going to get very serious in 2-3 years' time when these agent systems start becoming really capable. We're only seeing the beginnings of the agent era, let's call it. But you can imagine, and I think hopefully you understood from the keynote, what the ingredients are, what it's going to come together with. And then I think we really need a step change in research on analysis and understanding, controllability. But the other key thing is it's got to be international. That's pretty difficult, and I've been very consistent on that, because it's a technology that's going to fit everyone in the world. It's being built by different countries and different companies in different countries. So you've got to get some international kind of norm, I think, around what we want to use these systems for, and what are the kinds of benchmarks that we want to test safety and reliability on. But there's plenty of work to get on with now. Like, we don't have those benchmarks. We and the industry and academia should be agreeing to a consensus of what those are.
What role do you want to see export controls play in doing what you just said?
Well, export controls is a very complicated issue, and obviously geopolitics today is extremely complicated. And there, I see both sides of the arguments on that. There's proliferation, uncontrolled proliferation of these technologies. Do you want different places to have frontier modeling, training capability? I'm not sure that's a good idea. But on the other hand, you want Western technology to be the thing that's adopted around the world. So it's a complicated trade-off. Like, if there was an easy answer, I think we'd all, I would be, shouting it from the rooftops. But I think it's nuanced, like most real-world problems are.
Do you think we're heading into a bipolar conflict with China over AI if we aren't in one already? I mean, just recently we saw the Trump administration making a big push to make the Middle East, countries in the Gulf like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, into AI powerhouses, have them use American chips to train models that will not be sort of accessible to China and its AI powers. Do you see that becoming sort of the foundations of a new global conflict?
Well, I hope not. But I think short term, I feel like AI is getting caught up in the bigger geopolitical shifts that are going on. So I think it's just part of that, and it happens to be one of the most topical new things that's appearing. But on the other hand, what I'm hoping is, as these technologies get more and more powerful, the world will realize we're all in this together, because we are. And so, and the last few steps towards AGI, hopefully we're on the longer timelines, actually, right? The more the timelines I'm thinking about, then we get time to sort of get the collaboration we need, at least on a scientific level, before then, would be good.
Do you feel like you're in sort of the final home stretch to AGI? I mean, Sergey Brin, Google's co-founder, had a memo that was reported on by my colleague at the New York Times earlier this year that went out to Google employees and said, we're in the sort of the home stretch, and everyone needs to get back to the office and be working all the time because this is when it really matters. Do you have that sense of of finality or sort of entering a new phase or an end game?
I think we are past the middle game, that's for sure. But I've been working every hour there is for the last 20 years because I've felt how important and momentous this technology would be, and we've thought it was possible for 20 years. And I think it's coming into view now. I agree with that. And whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 2 years, that they're all actually quite short timelines when you're discussing what the enormity of the transformation of this technology is going to bring. That none of those timelines are very long.
We're going to switch to some more general questions about
Sure.
the AI future.
Sure.
A lot of people now are starting to, at least in conversations that I'm involved in, think about what the world might look like after AGI. The context in which I actually hear the most about this is from parents who want to know what their kids should be doing, studying. Will they go to college?
Yeah.
You have kids that are older than my kid.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that?
So I think that when it comes to kids, and I get asked this quite a lot, is university students. I think first of all, I wouldn't dramatically change some of the basic advice on STEM, getting good at even the things like coding, I would still recommend, because I think whatever happens with these AI tools, you'll be better off understanding how they work and how they function and what you can do with them. I would also say immerse yourself now. That's what I would be doing as a teenager today in trying to become a sort of ninja at using the latest tools. I think you can almost be sort of superhuman in some ways if you got really good at using all the latest, coolest AI tools. But don't neglect the basics too, because you need the fundamentals. And then I think teach sort of meta skills really of like learning to learn. And the only thing we know for sure is there's going to be a lot of change over the next 10 years, right? So how does one get ready for that? What kind of skills are useful for that? Creativity skills, adaptability, resilience. I think all of these sort of, meta skills is what will be important for the next generation. And I think it'll be very interesting to see what they do, because they're going to grow up AI native, just like the last generation grew up mobile and iPad and, sort of that kind of, tablet native, and then previously internet and computers, which was my era. And, they always, I think the kids of that era always seem to adapt to make use of the latest, coolest tools. And I think there's more we can do on the AI side to make the tools actually, if people are going to use them for school and education, let's make them really good for that and sort of provably good. And I'm very excited about bringing it to education in a big way, and also to, if you had an AI tutor, to bring it to poorer parts of the world that don't have good educational systems. So I think there's a lot of upside there too.
Another thing that kids are doing with AI is chatting a lot with digital companions. Google DeepMind doesn't make any of these companions yet. Some of what I've seen so far seems pretty worrying. It seems pretty easy to create a chatbot that just does nothing but tell you how wonderful you are, and that can sort of like lead into some dark and weird places. So I'm curious what observations you've had as you like look at this market for AI companions, and whether you think I might want to build this someday, or I'm going to leave that to other people.
Yeah, I think we've got to be very careful as we start entering that domain, and that's why we haven't yet, and we're being very thoughtful about that. My view on this is more through the lens of the universal assistant that we talked about yesterday, which is something that's incredibly useful for your everyday productivity. Gets rid of the boring, mundane tasks that we all hate doing to give you more time to do the things that you love doing. I also really hope that they're going to enrich your lives by giving you incredible recommendations, for example, on all sorts of amazing things that you didn't realize you would enjoy, sort of delight you with surprising things. So I think these are the ways I'm hoping that these systems will go. And actually, on the positive side, I feel like if this assistant becomes really useful and knows you well, you could sort of program it with you, obviously with natural language, to protect your attention. So you could almost think of it as a assistant that works for you, as an individual, it's yours, and it protects your attention from being assaulted by other algorithms that want your attention, which is and actually nothing to do with AI. Most social media sites, that's what they're doing effectively. Their algorithms are trying to gain your attention, and I think that's actually the worst thing. And it'd be great to protect that, so we can be more in creative flow, whatever it is that you actually want to do. That's how I would want these systems to be useful to people.
If you could build a system like that, I think people would be so incredibly happy. I think right now people feel assailed by the algorithms in their life, and they don't know what to do about it.
Well, the reason is because you have to use you've got one brain, and you have to, let's say, whatever it is, a social media stream, you have to dip into that torrent to then get the piece of information you want. But then you're doing it with the same brain, so you've already affected your mind and your mood and other things by dipping into that torrent and to find the valuable the piece of information that you wanted. But if an assistant, digital assistant, did that for you, you would you'd only get the useful nugget, and you wouldn't need to break your mood or what it is that you're doing the day, or your concentration with your family, whatever it is. I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, Casey loves that idea. You love that idea. I love this idea of an AI agent that protects your attention from all the forces trying to assault it. Yeah. I'm not sure how the ads team at Google is going to feel about this, but we can ask them when the time comes.
Sure.
Some people are starting to look at the job market, especially for recent college graduates, and worry that we're already starting to see signs of AI-powered job loss. Anecdotally, I talked to young people who, a couple years ago might have been interested in going into fields like tech or consulting or finance or law, who are just saying, like, I don't know that these jobs are going to be around much longer. A recent article in The Atlantic wondered if we're starting to see AI competing with college graduates for these entry-level positions. Do you have a view on that?
I haven't looked at that. I don't know. I haven't seen the studies on that, but maybe it's starting to appear now. I don't think there's any hard numbers on that yet. At least I haven't seen it. I think for now, I mostly see these as tools that are augmenting what you can do and what you can achieve. I think like with most, I think the next era, I mean, maybe after AGI, things will be different again. But over the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to find what normally happens with big sort of new technology shifts, which is that some jobs get disrupted, but then new more valuable, usually more interesting jobs get created. So I do think that's what's going to happen in the nearer term. Today's graduates and the next 5 years, let's say, I think it's very difficult to predict after that. That's part of this sort of more societal change that we need to get ready for.
I mean, I think the tension there is that you're right. These tools do give people so much more leverage, but they also reduce the need for big teams of people doing certain things. I was talking to someone recently who said, they had been at a data science company in their previous job that had 75 people working on some kind of data science tasks. And now they're at a startup that has one person doing the work that used to require 75 people. And so I guess the question I'd be curious to get your view on is, what are the other 74 people supposed to do?
Well, look, I think these tools are going to unlock the ability to create things much more quickly. So, I think there'll be more people that will do startup things. I mean, there's a lot more surface area one could attack and try with these tools that was possible before. So let's take programming, for example. So obviously these systems are getting better at coding, but the best coders, I think, are getting differential value out of it because they still understand how to pose the question and architect the whole code base and check what the coding does. But simultaneously, at the hobbyist end, it's allowing designers and maybe non-technical people to vibe code some things, whether that's prototyping games or websites or movie ideas. So in theory, it should be those other 70 people, whatever, could be creating new startup ideas. Maybe it's going to be less of these bigger teams and more smaller teams of very powered by AI tools. But that goes back to the education thing then. Which skills are now important? It might be different skills, like creativity, sort of vision, and design sensibility, could become increasingly important.
Do you think you'll hire as many engineers next year as you hired this year?
I think so. Yeah, there's no plan to hire less, but we have to see how fast the coding agents improve. Today they're not, they can't do things on their own. They're just helpful for the best, for the best human coders.
Last time we talked to you, we asked you about some of the more pessimistic views about AI in the public. And one of the things you said to us was that the field needed to demonstrate concrete use cases that were just clearly beneficial to people to kind of shift things.
Yes.
My observation is that I think there are even more people now who are actively antagonistic toward AI. And I think maybe one reason is they hear folks at the big labs saying pretty loudly, eventually this is going to replace your job. And most people just think, well, I don't want that, So I'm curious, looking on from that past conversation, if you feel like we have seen some use cases, enough use cases to start to shift public opinion, or if not, what some of those things might be that actually change views here.
Well, I think we're working on those things. They take time to develop. I think a kind of universal assistant would be one of those things if it was kind of really yours and working for you effectively. So technology that works for you. I think that this is what economists and other experts should be working on: is does everyone manage a suite of fleet of agents that are doing things for you, and including potentially earning you money or building you things? Does that become part of the normal job process? I could imagine that in the next 4 or 5 years. I also think that as we get closer to AGI and we make breakthroughs in, we probably talked about last time, material sciences, energy, fusion, these sorts of things helped by AI. We should start getting to a position in society where we're getting towards what I would call radical abundance, where there's a lot of resources to go around. And then again, it's more of a political question of how would you distribute that in a fair way, right? So I've heard this term like universal high income, something like that. I think is going to probably be good and necessary, but obviously there's a lot of complications there that need to be thought through. And then in between there's this transition period, between now and whenever we have that sort of situation where what do we do about the change in the interim, and depends on how long that is too.
What part of the economy do you think AGI will transform last?
Well, I mean, I think the parts of the economy where involves human to human interaction and emotion, and those things I think will probably be the hardest things for AI to do. So
but aren't people already doing AI therapy and talking with chatbots for things that they might have paid someone $100 an hour for?
Well, therapy is a very narrow domain, and I'm not sure exactly. There's a lot of hype about those things. I'm not actually sure how many of those things are really going on in terms of actually affecting the real economy, and rather than just sort of more toy things. And I don't think the AI systems are capable of doing that properly yet. But just the kind of emotional connection and that we get from talking to each other and doing things in nature in the real world, I don't think that AI can really replicate all of those things.
So if you lead hikes, that'd be a good job.
Yeah. Want to climb Everest?
Yeah.
My intuition on this is that it's going to be some heavily regulated industry where there will just be a massive pushback on the use of AI to displace labor or take people's jobs, like healthcare or education or something like that. But you think it's going to be an easier lift in those heavily regulated industries?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it might be, but then we have to weigh that up as society, whether we want all the positives of that. For example, curing all diseases, or I think there's a lot of finding new energy sources. So I think these things would be clearly very beneficial for society, and I think we need for our other big challenges. It's not like there's no challenges in society other than AI, but I think AI can be a solution to a lot of those other challenges, be that energy, resource constraints, aging, disease, you name it, and water access, etc. It's a ton of problems facing us today, climate. I think AI can potentially help with all of those. I agree with you. Society will need to decide what it wants to use these technologies for. And but then, what's also changing is what we discussed earlier with products is the technology is going to continue advancing, and that will open up new possibilities like a kind of radical abundance, space travel, these things, which are a little bit out of scope today unless you read a lot of sci-fi, but I think rapidly becoming real.
During the Industrial Revolution, there were lots of people who embraced new technologies, moved from farms to cities to work in the new factories, were sort of early adopters on that curve. But that was also when the transcendentalists started retreating into nature and rejecting technology. That's when Thoreau went to Walden Pond, and there was a big movement of Americans who just saw the new technology and said, I don't think so, not for me. Mm-hmm. Do you think there will be a similar movement around rejection of AI? And if so, how big do you think it'll be?
I don't know if it'll be, there could be a get back to nature. And I think a lot of people will want to do that. And I think this potentially will give them the room and space to do it, right? If you're in a world of radical abundance, I fully expect that's what a lot of us will want to do, is use it to, I think, again, I'm thinking about it sort of spacefaring and more, kind of maximum human flourishing. But I think that will be exactly some of the things that a lot of us will choose to do. But I have time and the space and the resources to do it.
Are there parts of your life where you say, I'm not going to use AI for that, even though it might be pretty good at it for some sort of reason, wanting to protect your creativity or your thought process or something else?
I don't think AI is good enough yet to have impinged on any of those sorts of areas where I would, it's mostly I'm using it for, things like you did with Notebook LM, which I find great, like breaking the ice on a new topic, scientific topic, and then deciding if I want to get more deep into it. That's one of my main use cases, summarization, those things. I think those are all just helpful. But, we'll see. I haven't got any examples of what you suggested yet, but maybe as AI gets more powerful, there will be.
When we talked to Dario Amodei of Anthropic recently, he talked about this feeling of excitement mixed with a kind of melancholy about the progress that AI was making in domains where he had spent a lot of time trying to be very good,
yes.
like coding.
Yes.
Where it was like, you see a new coding system that comes out, it's better than you think that's amazing, and then your second thought is like, ooh, that stings a little bit.
Yeah.
Have you had any experiences like that?
Of course. So maybe one reason it doesn't sting me so much is I've had that experience when I was very young with chess. So, chess was going to be my first career, and, I was playing pretty professionally when I was a kid for the England junior teams, and then Deep Blue came along, right? And clearly the computers were going to be much more powerful than the world champion forever after that. And so, but yeah, I still enjoy playing chess. People still do. It's different, but it's a bit like I can, Usain Bolt, we celebrate him for running the 100 meters incredibly fast, but we've got cars, but we don't care about that, right? Like we're interested in other humans doing it. And I think that'll be the same with robotic football and all of these other things. So, and that maybe goes back to what we discussed earlier about what I think in the end we're interested in other human beings. That's why even like a novel, maybe AI could write one day a novel that's sort of technically good, but I don't think it would have the same soul or connection to the reader that if you knew it was written by an AI, at least as far as I can see for now.
You mentioned robotic football. Is that a real thing? We're not sports fans, so I just want to make sure I haven't missed something.
I was meaning soccer.
No.
I don't know. I think there are RoboCup sort of soccer type little robots trying to kick balls and things. I'm not sure how serious it is, but there is a field of robotic football.
You mentioned sometimes a novel written by a robot might not feel like it have a soul. I have to say, for as incredible as the technology is in VO or Imagine, I sort of feel that way with it, where it's like, it's beautiful to look at, but I don't know what to do with it. Right. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's what I was, that's why we work with great artists like Darren Aronofsky and Shankar on the music, I totally agree. I think these are tools. And they can come up with technically good things. And I mean, VO3 is unbelievable. Like when I look at I don't know if you've seen some of the things that are going viral and being posted at the moment with the voices. Actually, I didn't realize how big a difference audio is going to make to the video. I think it just really brings it to life. But it's still not, as Darren would say yesterday when we were discussing on an interview, it doesn't, he brings the storytelling. It's not got deep storytelling like a master filmmaker would do or a master novelist, the top of their game. And it might never do, right? It's just always going to feel something's missing. It's a sort of a soul, for a better word, of the piece. The real humanity, the magic, if you like, the great pieces of art. Art too. When I see a Van Gogh or a Rothko, or why does that touch your? I spill sort of hairs going up the back of my spine because I remember and about what they went through and the struggle to produce that, right, in every brushstroke of Van Gogh's brushstrokes, his sort of torture. And I'm not sure what that would mean, even if the AI mimicked that and you were told that. It was like, so what? Right. And so I think that is the piece that, at least as far as I can see out to 5-10 years, the top human creators will always be bringing. And that's why we've done all of our tools, VO, Lyria, in collaboration with top creative artists.
The new Pope Leo, is reportedly interested in AGI. Yep. I don't know if he's AGI pilled or not, but that's something that he's spoken about before. Do you think we will have a religious revival or a renaissance of interest in faith and spirituality in a world where AGI is forcing us to think about what gives our lives meaning?
I think that potentially could be the case. And I actually did speak to the last Pope about that. And the Vatican's been interested, but even prior to this Pope, I haven't spoken to him yet. But on these matters, how does AI and religion and technology in general and religion interact. And what's interesting about the Catholic Church is, and I'm a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, is they've always had, which is strange for a religious body, a scientific arm, which they like to always say Galileo was the founder of. And those interesting.
Didn't go great for him.
Turned out great.
But then, and it's actually really separate. And I always thought that was quite interesting. And people like Stephen Hawking and avowed atheists were part of the academy. And that's partly why I agreed to join it, is because it's a fully scientific body. And it's very interesting. And I was fascinated. They've been interested in this for 10 plus years. So they were on this early in terms of like how interesting, or how from a philosophical point, I think this technology will be. And I actually think we need more of that type of thinking and work from philosophers and theologians. Actually would be really, really good. So I hope the new Pope is genuinely interested.
We'll close on a question that I recently heard Tyler Cowen ask Jack Clark from Anthropic that I thought was so good and decided to just steal it whole cloth. In the ongoing AI revolution, what is the worst age to be?
Oh, wow. Well, gosh, I haven't thought about that. But I mean, I think any age where you can live to see it is a good age, because I think we are going to make some great strides with things like, medicine. And so I think it's going to be an incredible journey. None of us know, exactly how it's going to transpire. It's very difficult to say, but it's going to be very interesting to find out.
Try to be young if you can.
Yes, young is always better.
Yeah.
I mean, in general, young is always better.
All right, Demis Hassabis, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you, Demis.
Thank you very much.